our chat this morning on Talk, and it was really, and it happens quite a bit, but today particularly, like everybody was sharing their experiences, and we all know this. I mean, it is such a relationship that you go into that you don't realize, because everybody, when they're going through a divorce, realizes this is a domain we do not
Yeah.
understand. The legal, the parameters of this world is like, that's why you guys do what you do, and we go
Right.
through school, and you get educated on it, and it's something that we're not educated on. We don't understand what we're doing. It's overwhelming, it's emotional,
Mhm.
and very, like, very scary, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting there, you go in there and you're like, okay, I stand to lose my finances, time with my kids, my house. I mean, there's so many things of just fear driven circumstances that are happening in your world. And you talk to all these different lawyers potentially, or maybe even just one, and whatever they say kind of holds true to everything that you feel like, okay, well, they know more than I do, right? And then once you start getting educated, and once you start understanding, and also understanding what you want, and the clarity, and having clarity within, you start realizing, oh, maybe this lawyer isn't steering me in the right direction, or maybe they don't understand it. Anyway,
Yeah.
I want as a lawyer for you, like, I know there's a couple of things we want to talk about. One is a little bit, because it's a hot topic from this morning, is a little bit about your stance on all of that, right? And in the sense that, yes, not all lawyers are made equal, like all doctors are not made
Right.
equal, like all people are not made equal, right?
Yep.
So not fair to say that it's always the lawyer's fault, number one. And I always say that we need a lawyer because they know the law. That's it.
Right.
That's what's important, right?
Yeah.
Uh, that's one thing I'd like to just touch on. And the second thing was, again, like, how do you help your clients avoid the escalation that could potentially happen, right?
Yep.
There's a crossroads, or there's certain things, and what are some of the ways that you've helped your clients do that, which is really important to know. And I just want to preface all of this, actually, because we didn't really introduce you. So Jordan Rosenberg is a divorce family lawyer in Illinois. But even though he's in Illinois, he can speak to the being a lawyer in the family law system, right? So
Yep.
your take on it. So that's what I just wanted to say that before, because people will keep watching this, and I definitely wanted to make sure that you can find Instagram, because he's live on Instagram now, but find him later on Instagram as well, and we'll put that all in the show notes.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much and for inviting me to do this. And it's always nice working with you guys. And like I was telling earlier, it's so nice to have a collaboration between like sides, right? So like you were talking about, Lila, it's like there's sort of the coaching perspective and the support
Yeah.
groups and the support systems versus, the scary legal guys like me, right? So I think that kind of answering your first question, it's like how do you kind of pick the right lawyer, and like where does that go? And for me, it's always a partnership with your client, right? And the starting point is just comfort level.
Yeah.
And like you said, not all lawyers are made the same, and some are more litigious, and some are more mediation based, and some are more alternative dispute based.
Mm-hmm.
Some have different reputations, and you kind of have to go with your gut and your comfort level and your relational aspect with that lawyer. And what I would recommend, and I always do, is meet with a couple
Yeah.
lawyers, right? Get some recommendations from your friends. I mean, that's really, I think, a really good place to start. Is my best referral source is people whom I've worked with before, right? And it's, well, I know so and so who knows so and so that sent me so and so, and it's a good starting point, right? And you trust your support system, and they kind of steer you in the right direction. But you'll always have different experiences with different lawyers, just like you have different experiences with different people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from there, once you kind of find your comfort zone and you guys are kind of aligned in your values and how you want to approach things, I mean, at least from my perspective, like you were saying, Lila, it's all, this is people's lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you've got your kids, you've got your house, you've got your money, and everything's tied up in this thing. And so communication is so important from my perspective, and how I give advice to clients, and updating them in real time, and making sure that they're feeling appropriate and they're feeling comforted and they know what's going on with their case. I mean, to me, that's so valuable. And I get so much feedback from so many of my clients saying, thank you so much for being so communicative and letting me know what's going on. And even on cases where I inherit clients from other lawyers who struggled with communication and their clients, it's like having a friend, right? That you can pick up the phone and talk to, but unfortunately we bill you for it, right? And I'm saying that facetiously, but in seriousness. But
Yeah.
it's about comfort, and it's about communication, and it's about kind of keeping that open. But also, from my perspective, also is you're not exclusively looking for just legal advice from your lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's how to manage yourself, how to manage your responses, how to manage your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And when things get escalated, like, kind of what we're talking about today, methods that you can kind of work on yourself and who to reach out to, and reach out to, the people at Split.fyi, and, try to regulate yourself as much as possible, because a lot of the emotional stuff and the emotional sort of issues, it's it's expensive to reach out to your lawyer and kind of hash out those discussions, rather than lean on your support system, call Lila, like call your therapist, call your friend,
Mm-hmm.
find that support system so that can always complement what's happening in the legal world.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, I mean, we go on about this quite a bit in community as well, that how important, and they recognize it, when they're showing up for themselves, like on Coffee Talk or Accountability Hour, we have these mini ecosystems of gatherings and get-togethers on Zoom where and they're all designed to do something different. One is about accountability, like how are you working on your divorce, right? So we always say this, and I think you might agree that, you should not be working on your divorce full time, right? And there are moments, and it does feel like a full-time job, by the way, because there's a lot of work that you can and should be doing, but to segment it so that you're not working at it all at once, right?
Yeah.
And there's certain times, like, and give yourself a break, right? And we always say that, and and nobody really wants to do it. So there's those who are like, I got so much to do and I don't know what to do, and they're all consumed by it. And then there's those who want to bury their head in the sand,
Right.
right?
Right.
And lawyers get frustrated as well, right? So there is a twofold, and then when all of a sudden they take their head out of the sand and they start communicating to the lawyer, they expect a response right away.
Right.
And then the thing is like the communication. So what I want to go back to, which is really important, and also de-escalating
Yeah.
too, because this is really important, is that when there's an urgency that arises and you throw it at your lawyer, or you're all of a sudden and you expect something in response right away, recognize that, maybe establish that communication technique from the beginning of the relationship. Like,
Yeah.
hey, what if, and this is something that's really important. I tell my clients this. It's like, hey, what if something is really urgent and I feel like it's urgent, and it might not be urgent, but how can I expect, like, what's your turnaround time? What can I expect? And are you going to respond to me like over the weekend? Some lawyers do, by the
Right.
way, whatever, that's to each its own. But, it's establishing that, like, you've got kids right now, a sick kid,
Right.
you've got kids. So it's like, it's not disrespectful to you, but I also have a life that I might not be able to get to your response if it's not urgent. And this is what I say. I'm like, I told my lawyer this. I'm like, if you don't think it's urgent, then don't respond to me, and I'm okay. And I recognize that right away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you respond to me within 24 hours, then I'm assuming that it is urgent.
Right. Right. Well, and there's a lot there. I mean, so from even as a starting point, I mean, like, in counseling my clients, it's like, go back to the basics,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's number one is when you're meeting with your lawyer, address that right away. Like, what's the communication protocol? Like, how do we establish communication? What's the best way to get in contact with you? What's the turnaround time? Like, establish how that works so that your expectations are set,
Right.
and that you know exactly what that protocol looks like. So, a tip that I give people is like, look, sometimes there's going to be those times where you're overwhelmed and you're all in your head and you can't, you just need to have a sit down conversation with your lawyer, right? Totally fine, totally appropriate, makes complete sense. I would just say, look, send a short email and say, look, feeling a little overwhelmed, let's schedule a time to come in. And that way it's not a cold call. It's something that's
Mm-hmm.
documented, that's in, at least my hub, which is my email, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I schedule something, and you know what? You should be afforded that opportunity to sit and vent with your lawyer and kind of like articulate how you're feeling, right? And again, just it's that protocol that sets the stage, and you should speak your needs as a client immediately right off the bat in the initial consultation, and then in follow-up, and say, look, here's what I'm expecting, here's what I need, how is that different than what you're going to offer me and what I'm signing up for, basically. So
Right.
and I think if your expectations are set, that's half the battle.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not wondering whether or not they're going to respond on a weekend, or is it 48-hour turnaround time, is it 24-hour turnaround time, is there a plan, is there a strategy, depending on what the issues are? Sometimes, on cases where there's an order of protection, or there's some immediate issues that are going on, obviously that's an emergency, and those issues escalate to the top of my to-do list immediately. So there's more contact, and there's more, I guess, stuff to communicate about with my clients. But again, it's just establishing that initial protocol, and kind of going back to what you said in conjunction with that is, I think divorce is a full-time job. And it's like, not only do people have 9-to-5 jobs, or even more demanding jobs, but then it's like this layered with everything else, right? And at least, I get a ton of emails after 5 o'clock and before 9, because that's when people are off, right? So it's like they come home, and a lot of my clients, they got kids, they got to get them situated, get them dinner, get them to bed, and then all of a sudden it's 9 o'clock, and it's like, oh, now I got to focus on everything I got to get from my lawyer, and I got to respond to these 5 emails, and oh my God, if there's something urgent happening, I got to review this, I got to get feedback on this, I got to put together this. It's a lot. So not only is the communication so important, but like setting boundaries and like scheduling time to focus on your divorce, and gathering documents, and doing what you're supposed to be doing, and what's being asked of your lawyer. On a weekend where you don't have your kids, or whatever, you pour yourself a little tea or coffee, you kind of take a deep breath, and then you knock out all your emails with your lawyer on a weekend. And to me, that's a really good strategy that I tell a lot of my clients is, book time for this, even though you don't have it, but try to be organized, set boundaries, and really establish communication, so that expectations are clear.
And so, I want to keep this, I want to continue always talking to you, because I love everything you always say, but I wanted to say, like, just on an off chance, everybody's circumstances are different. We all know that, right? So and everybody's circumstances are urgent, because it's
exactly, of course,
right? So, part of the really, really want to hone in on is this escalation, how, for example, your ex writes a letter to you, or an email to you, or a message to you, right? And it triggers you, it gets you fearful, you send one back, and this starts to happening, and then you're roped in, because they're calling you and saying, oh my God, can you believe this? And they're threatening this, and this is happening, and blah, 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 da, da, da. I need you to get involved. And it's like, okay, so how do you navigate? And I know this is so general, but you can probably imagine, and I know you have been in that circumstance many, many times, because we hear it all the time in our community. So help us walk through maybe what are some of the steps that you do to just kind of help them regulate, right? And then kind of see how you can navigate and help that, because a lot of it is, to our theme, the communication breakdown. They are not going to be able to communicate well with their ex, because they didn't probably communicate well in their marriage. They are certainly not going to be able to communicate when they're in this fight, in this divorce, in this situation, right? So how do you help them without throwing more fuel to the fire?
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny, my answer is kind of the same, what we just talked about, is set expectations with your lawyer, right? Because whether, there's times where our clients are nice and calm, and they're communicative, and they're clear-headed, and, that there's not much going on, right? And there's times where it's just chaos. And not only is there something chaotic happening in their case, but maybe they're now overwhelmed with all the stuff they have to do. And it's, there's different levels of urgency, like you said, but, I would lean on your lawyer to say, look, point me in the right direction here, right? And what I would say is, I'd say, look, as a starting point, talk to your therapist, talk to your support system, talk to whomever to sort of regulate yourself and try to compartmentalize this as much as you possibly can in terms of what's happening with your divorce and how you're processing that from an emotional perspective. So that deconnection
Right.
and different ways that you can do that is so important.
So,
You know, I saw something that you posted either today or yesterday, but that's the standard BIF methodology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is you get an email that lights you up, or you get a a text that triggers you and your hair stands up and you're, oh my God, it ruins your whole day. It ruins the moment. If you're with your kids, you're distracted. If you're at work, you're distracted. I mean, it derails the entire situation. So kind of like you said, ways to kind of break that direct communication is critical also. And whether that's actually how you communicate, which is brief, informative, really business-like in how you're communicating, unimpassioned, because then you're not inviting a response and you're de-escalating just by things that you can control directly. And if your response is unimpassioned, unemotional, and solely related to issues that you absolutely have to communicate about, like if you share children together, there should be really no reason to communicate in a high conflict situation unless it's specifically related to your children in a specific situation, right? There's no point to call your soon to be ex-husband an a-hole, or you did this, or gaslight. I mean, there's no point to do that.
Right.
It's not productive. It's not it doesn't move the needle in any respect other than make you maybe feel good in that second. But every action has a reaction,
right?
So if you're sending a shot across the bow, you're going to get another shot across the bow. So it's like control. In terms of de-escalating, what we always say is, as a starting point, bucket one, control your responses and how you act. And that's what you absolutely readily can control. The other aspect is controlling your expectations, right? And if you know that you're going to get some sort of response based on what you do, right? Don't do that action.
Yeah.
If you know that your soon-to-be ex or your ex is completely narcissistic and wants to gaslight you and do whatever they can to kind of get a rise out of you because they got nothing else better to do, or because you've hurt them, right? Know that you're going to get a reaction for that. And you deal with that separately with your support system, with your therapist, and you will heal. And once you understand that expectation and that's how it's going to be, your responses, how you react, so important in sort of de-escalating a situation. And one more thing before you cut me off.
Yeah.
When we're talking about communication and the BIF system and, really informative, there's a lot of programs out there that, parenting apps, like there's a program called Our Family Wizard and Talking Parents. And, there's stuff out there where you can control sort of your notifications a little bit. So if you're out to lunch with your friends, or if you're out to breakfast with your kids, and you're getting 6, 7 text messages and calls from your ex or your husband or your wife or your partner, it doesn't have to detract from that moment, and you can check it when you need to. And it's also a good way of, there's additional accountability, because sometimes judges can look at it, guardians can look at it, and your lawyers can look at that communication too.
Well, funny you just said that, because that is exactly what we talked about at Coffee Talk.
Yeah.
And one of our community members came in and was like, I haven't spoken or texted my ex-husband for 2 months now. And I'm so proud, because everything's on email. And I don't have that bing. And then anytime that he does text me, an email, and I say, we're going to continue on email. And she's like, I feel like my nervous system is calmed down because of it. And so she's really set that boundary, and she's taken control of it. Like, amazing, just amazing awareness also of like, wow, this actually isn't so hard, because it is, it's unnatural, right? You were married, you're used to communicating all these things. You've got kids, especially if they're young, you've got this, way of communicating. You feel like you should be able to continue that, but actually recognize that for the time being, it might not be forever, but this boundary needs to be set. And so that your nervous system can be regulated in it.
Totally.
But one of the things that I was going to go, and another thing on all of this is that people feel, and I know they come to you and I say this, like, do I need to respond to this? So they're also really insecure and unsecure, like, because if they're being accused of something, okay,
Yeah,
in the eyes of the court, they're thinking, in the eyes of the law, do I need to like rebuttal and say that's not true?
right.
So that's a really important thing. And I know you must intervene in all these, because I'm sure people ask you, like, do I even need to respond to this? So they're accusing me of X, Y, and Z with no merit,
Right.
but how do I defend myself without going into that
Yeah.
war? Right?
Yeah. And it's sort of like, unfortunately, like learning a new language, and as you sort of detangle and learn how to control your responses, and regulate your expectations and set those boundaries, the immediate knee-jerk reaction, just like when you're driving and you get a text, right? You look at your shiny phone, there's all kinds of flashing going on. You want to respond
Right.
and kind of scratch that itch to get the red one off your phone,
Right.
right? So it's, and what you were saying earlier in your other post is like, you get a communication, you sort of learn all these things as you go, and it's a process and it's not right away, but you learn to sort of take a breath and analyze what's actually being said. Does it need a response? And I think what people would probably find and probably relate to is that most communications that are like that probably don't need a
Right.
response, right? And if it's something where it's like, well, what time, maybe our schedule's all jumbled up, there's, our, the kids are done with school at noon today, but our parenting agreement says 3, how do you want to handle this? I mean, to me, that's a legitimate back and forth that you can readily control with a business-like transaction.
Right.
If it's, hey, my mom's in town, she really wants to see the girls. Can we go out to lunch, even though it's your parenting time? Great. And even though those, there's systems in Our Family Wizard and the other parenting apps and stuff like that, where you can even control the request to make those
Right.
accommodations, which is even a further boundary, which is great. But it's responses and communications like that where you can respond. If it's something where, hey, you did this, you did that, you did this. I mean, to me, again, like I said earlier, it's 0 point to respond. And what I'd rather have my clients do is say, look, this instance came up, right? This is what happened. And in real time, sort of like journal it and maybe create an Excel spreadsheet and say, look, even though it doesn't warrant a response, here's what actually happened. Here's my recollection of it. You don't have any, you don't need to fight with your ex or your husband or your wife or your partner in that moment, right?
Right.
If there's going to be a fight about that issue and it's not, somebody's life or safety is at
Right.
issue, not jot it down so that you can recall it and that you have a recollection in real time of what's going on. And if there was actually an incident that needed some sort of response or justification, write it down. And, the response is very much, well, it, again, very business-like, I don't agree with that, that recitation of what happened, but appreciate your feedback.
Yeah.
Something like that,
But that's not how, I recall it happening. And
right.
that's it. Not defending yourself, or then even worse, attacking them.
I think so. And, to me, it's like, it's really hard to control, and this whole thing about de-escalation. I mean, that's a good way, strategy where you can de-escalate in the moment and sort of on these little skirmishes, good way to de-escalate is just deflect. And of course it's, the whole divorce process is always an assessment of picking your battles.
Yeah.
And when do you kind of not de-escalate? When can you not control whether it escalates?
Right.
The day-to-day stuff, you did this, you did that, easy to de-escalate, move on with your day, change your mindset that you're understanding that that's going to happen, but we're going to move on, right?
Right.
It's when you're in the heat of a divorce and, your husband, your partner, your wife's getting nasty and they're filing stuff in court, and, how do you de-escalate it? It's really hard. And especially if somebody's coming at you, with their bullhorns on,
Right.
do you kind of wave the red thing and have the bull, readily charge at it? Or, I mean, like, do you do something in counter to try to relax it? So it's hard. I mean, when you're really in litigation, to de-escalate, you don't really have a lot of control over that. And I think that just sort of in the trenches and, it's really managing your expectations, managing your responses, and leaning on your lawyer and your support system to sort of guide you with a really poignant strategy.
Yeah.
And look, here's what's happening. You're aware of what's happening. You're aware of the exposure, knowledge is power type
Yeah.
thing. And if your expectations are such that, look, this is the road that we're going on, I don't really have control over it, but I trust my lawyer. I'm going to follow his lead. I'm going to follow the lead of my support system. I'm going to endure this. It's hard, but that sometimes happens in divorce. And sometimes you can't de-escalate it. And sometimes the only way to de-escalate it is to escalate it yourself.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, and I say this a lot, we've seen it in our community a lot, as, when they're up against a very challenging person, and who like to escalate things and to trigger things and to control things. At the end of the day, they're showing up as themselves. And I think one of the hardest bits for your clients, for anybody going through it, is that they don't feel like they're being seen or heard. And they feel like you're like, is this crazy situation? And the trust, of course, like nobody wants to go to court.
Yeah.
Nobody wants a party decision for them, right? And even lawyers at the end of the day really don't want to do that. Even if they're just, and they know, they're litigators, it's not the best place to be, right? We all know that in the end of the day, it's one person making a decision for somebody else's life.
Yep.
And I think that, but I will say, as always saying, as hard as it is to endure all of those things, they are constantly showing up as themselves and proving who they are. At the end, if it does go in front of the judge sees it. Like, evidence is key, right? And that evidence is huge. And so you're collating evidence is the way to look at it, is what I say, right? Because you can't have always hardcore evidence on certain things. Like, she said, he said, she said, he said is always there. But when they're showing up as themselves in the text messages, in the emails, doing all these crazy things, guess what? They're giving you the evidence that you need.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. And, we've had so many cases where, even on cases where we make allegations and we're receiving allegations, and they're nasty allegations, but they've never really been proven. I mean, even when you go to the nth degree and now there's testimony and you raise your right hand and we've got somebody on the stand and we're walking them through these sort of troubling experiences, and, how's communication with your husband? Oh my God, it's terrible. Hearing it sort of from the proverbial horse's mouth, and, in an authentic and meaningful way as yourself, is the most powerful testimony like that you can hope for as a lawyer. And it's like, look, this is what we've been trying to get across the entire time. So to say, be yourself and be authentic, and, yes, you should communicate in a business-like way, but again, it's not like you're a robot, right? You're a human being. So it's like, be yourself, present as yourself, but also understand that, just like kind of what we're alluding to, is everything that you're putting in writing, a text, email, I mean, it could be an exhibit in court.
Absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to ask you guys is, so you said one of the, the biggest, one of the things that clients say is they don't feel heard, right? I guess, what does that mean? And if you were to give a lawyer some advice and saying, look, how do you better hear your clients based on what they're hearing? Like, what would you respond? What would you tell the lawyer?
Well, so this is where I would get back to, and I don't know if it's always coming from an aspect of the lawyers not hearing them, but like we always educate everybody in our community and always say, like, your lawyer can only know so much of your life. Here's your big life. Fold half is what your lawyer is probably comprehending, right? And then further along, you fold that piece of paper another, and then maybe that's what the discovery and all the writings and everything can capture. And then even fold that even more, and like, you've got this much chunk left of that piece of paper, and that's what the judge even figuring out about your life. So going back to that, though, is that, so without even knowing all of that, they don't feel like they're getting their story to the right people, or people are not believing them, or they don't see the urgency that they're feeling. That's what's like being not seen and heard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
Like, part of why we created Split.fyi is because we're like, people to not normalize it, because it's not a normal thing that you're going through, but normalize those feelings, and those things that you're going through are 100% legit and truthful and real. And it is really frustrating, especially when you're up against that difficulty, right?
Yeah.
And you know, as a lawyer, it's just having that empathy. It's just
Yeah.
like, oh my God, this is really, because you're going, you know, you're working with so many different people and different circumstances, but everyone's unique. But it really recognizing that this means a lot to you, and only almost discerning what is that most important piece, because they're not clear and they don't understand. Like half of the job of being a coach is getting to that point of clarity. It is understanding what is the most important thing to you. You thought it was your house, but it so happens that you want the ability to be able to move from this jurisdiction, right?
Yep.
What does that mean? Well, your lawyer needs to know that up front. Your lawyer needs to understand that you actually want to pave the path, that maybe you don't want to live in this district and you want that freedom to be able to move closer to your family. Whoa, that's
Yeah.
huge.
One of the first things that I tell all my clients is, look, and like we said, like I've said, you know, many times already, is you have to have a support system. You have to
Yes.
find a support system, and whether it's with you guys, whether it's with a close friend, whether it's with a therapist, whether it's with a, you know, an AA group. I mean, some
Right.
group that, or some people or some person that you can communicate with
Mhm.
to sort of parcel out the legal aspects with your divorce to the
Mhm.
emotional aspect of this, where you're, you know, you're separating your family, you're not going to see your kids every day, you might lose your house. I mean, nobody is expected to go through this process by themselves. It's, I mean, it's very, very difficult. So having that support system, huge, 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 huge. Where you get into trouble, I think, is when the lines blur too much. And whether that's if your divorce coach is actively in meetings with your lawyer, which there's a whole set of
Mhm.
different, you know, issues that could occur with that. But if sort of the coach is too loud and saying you should ask your lawyer to do this, 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 this,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's harmful, I think. And just like what we're saying is, you know, that could cause a waste of time, and that could cause us to go on different tangents and not actually move the needle, right? And on
Mm-hmm.
the other side of that is, if you don't have this support system, then like we were talking about earlier, you're spending a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of focus
Mhm.
on talking with your lawyer about some of these emotional
Mm-hmm.
issues. And yes, you know, your lawyer should have some empathy and should be able to relate with what you're going through with, whether that's through representing people or individually, but you're not getting the same sensation and the same satisfaction than you are in kind of farming it out. And so that's sort of the whole theme of, like, you know, how do we de-escalate? How do we
Well,
de-escalate the situation? How do we de-escalate yourself? And it's putting up those appropriate boundaries, from the legal perspective to communication slash coaching, and how you're separating your mind and how you're dealing with what issues are in front of you, both emotionally and legally.
well, and I think a big part, and I want to circle back, because I think that what a lot of, at least I can only speak for myself and what we've created with Split.fyi, is about getting to clarity and getting to what really matters, because everything matters in the
Yep.
beginning. But when you really start breaking it down, you're like, there's some things that matter more than others, and there's some things that actually I'm going to have to just come to grips with, that that's as my life is changing. I'm going through a transition. The life I used to live isn't the life I'm going to live in later on, right? It's going to look different. And so it's understanding that, accepting that, what is more important than other things. And that is the breakdown of what a lot of the work that we do. So to the point is that when you're listening to a story, or you're hearing them, you're hearing somebody who's a lot more clear. And then you can actually hear it. Then you can say, like, to what I was making that point earlier, is like, if that's really important to you to live near your family, right? And they
Yep.
live in another county, or they live somewhere different. Okay, I need to know that that's really where you're trying to strive for. And so let's work towards that. Do
Right.
you know what I mean? It's like, what are the urgencies? And let's segment them, because everything's urgent,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yep.
right? And I think that's where it's important to understand what you just you need to get to is a place of clarity. And that is de-escalation, because the more clear you are with what you need and what you want, not with the coach, not with the therapist, not with your mom or dad, not with your best friends, not with the Lord, like none of that. It's like you.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
That is the most important thing.
And it's not only is it, but I also think that's such a process, and that clarity doesn't come right away. And for some, it happens right away, and for some, it takes years. And depending on what type of, if you're in an abusive relationship, if you're, there's different types of dynamics of relationship where you kind of have to like deprogram yourself and like find yourself again and find your strength. And like I said, I mean that's why when you kind of separate and you're trying to prioritize, having that outlet away from your lawyers and that connection also with your lawyer in tandem is so important, because it helps you focus, it helps prioritize, and you're able to sort like exactly what you said is see more clearly. And when you think clearly and when you are the best version of yourself, right, then you can make good decisions for yourself and articulate what your priorities actually are.
And like, things I'll say is, if I have a client that's like, oh, I'm going to have a meeting with my lawyer and I'm going to go over this, and this. And I was like, if you had only 5 minutes with him or her, right? What is the one thing that you want to be clear about and get your information on? Just start with that.
Love that.
Just go, it's like, because otherwise, and by the way, there's a lot of people we know in our community walk away meeting with a lawyer and they're like, what just happened to me, right? Because A is a different language, B, it's a whole different world nobody knows about. Most people are going through it for the first time, right? They're like, first time dealing with a lawyer, by the way. Right?
Yeah.
So there's all those things and all these new learnings, and it's so overwhelming that you're not even retaining half the information. I almost think way better get in the books for 5-10 minutes, have that conversation, find out one thing, and then do another, maybe a couple days later, do another one. Let's like that. Don't be an overwhelming 1 hour intake where you're just like, I don't even know what to do anymore.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I was just talking to a potential new client the other day, and, they were all stressed out, and I'm spitting a lot at them.
Yeah.
And basically, they're asking all these questions all over the board, and I'm trying to be respectful and answer their questions. And, at the end of this, you kind of like drop your guard and you're like, look, I get it. And this is a ton of information. There's zero chance that you're going to be able to retain all this. I know you're going to have questions and follow up. If you wanted to meet again, let's do that again. So I love the segment thing. I love preparing for the meeting with your lawyer and kind of writing things down and, meeting with your coach, meeting with your, support system, saying, look, these are the things that are really important to understand from this meeting, and have an agenda and set the expectation with your lawyer. Right. So it's all stuff that, and honestly, it's like, it's common sense. But when you're in the moment and when you're going through this and when your head's spinning and, even just picking up the phone and calling your divorce lawyer is stressful. And I appreciate that,
Totally.
And not you're getting billed for it. There's a lot of information. It's a different language, like just all for all the things you say. So to prioritize, using that theme, your own priorities, but also how you want to communicate. And in the same vein as setting expectations, setting your agenda, and really, making sure that you're focused on what you need to be focused on to make you feel better, or to learn what you need to learn, and to get out of that meeting what you need to. So important.
So important. All right. Well, I mean, again, thank you, because I'm hoping that, anybody who's listening to this, we had, great turnout, and this will continue. We'll air it on our YouTube channel, Split.fyi YouTube channel, for other people to listen to, but it solidifies like really, baby steps. Don't be self number one. But it is very important to recognize like where your weaknesses are, check in with yourself, know what you're prepared to do. And it's okay that you don't have to, like, if you got the time with your lawyer, that you don't have to like go into this whole 1 hour, everything, touch co-parenting to finances to this, and you're just all over the shop and you're not going to retain anything. So segment it out, be prepared for it. Very, very useful, and I think your lawyer appreciates that. So yeah, I mean, this has been a great chat,
Yeah.
Jordan. Like, oh,
Yeah, and thank you guys so much. Like obviously it's so nice not only to be with you guys, but to be a resource, but to just like even just cultivate the connection between like the lawyer and the support
yeah,
and kind of learn a
Mm-hmm.
little bit both on, what your clients need from their perspective, what my clients need from your perspective.
totally.
It's an awesome resource that you guys have established, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, we're happy that you're part of the community too. So,
Awesome.
all right.
Awesome.
Until next
Good.
time,
All right.
thanks.
Take care.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
All right.